We're going to continue our work on Chapter 9 tonight. We got up through the exercises on page 326. And what I did preemptively before we started is I made sure I got my book out, got to the right page here. We are going to pick up at the bottom of page 327. I also was preemptive and opened up my project here and just made sure that everything was running. So I just fired it up like that very quickly and went to the contact page. And I'm not submitting anything, but I do see my little asterisks there, which are very hard to read, but it seems like everything's working. So we are now going to pick up on bottom of page 327, step number 1. And let's read the next instruction here as I move my stuff on my second screen, which you guys are not seeing right now, but I can assure you that that's what I'm doing. They want us to be on the contact form, or the user control here, and be in design view, which I already am. I'm going to get rid of that little error box at the bottom. And it says here, right-click the row with the button control. And they make a little caveat here, say right-click a cell, not the button, and choose Insert Row. So what we're doing is basically modifying the table. So, and I'm going to assume they want a row above, no, a row below. And then you can see it added another row to the bottom. Now it says select the 3 cells of the row you just inserted. And you guys can probably anticipate what we're going to do next. We're going to merge those. So we're going to go to Modify and Merge Cells. And basically we're just creating one TD that goes across that whole TR. Step number 3 says from the validation category of the toolbox, drag a validation summary control over, and that's the one that's listed right here at the bottom. And we want to drop this into the new cell that we just created. So this is going to come down right here. And I mean, it's pretty easy to figure out what this is going to do, right? It's talking about validation summary. So instead of putting like a message right next to each box where the error happens, this is going to create a list of the errors. And you know, I'll tell you what, in terms of like practices, this might not be, I think, the best approach these days, because I think that you guys are probably seeing in a lot of modern websites how it's better if somebody makes a mistake in a certain spot to show them exactly where the mistake is at that spot. But you still get websites that will say, hey, you entered the wrong credit card number, and you don't get it until after you hit the button. So this is kind of one of those tools that will operate in that way. They do want us to change the CSS class for this. We'll do that down in the Properties windows while it's still highlighted. And they want us to apply error message to it. So just like that. So in camel case, so it's capital E, capital M. And then press enter to lock it in. And it says step number 4, in the empty cell after the text box for the home phone number, they want you to drag in a custom validator. So that would be right in this spot here. But you see this is the empty cell right after home phone number. So drag and drop that into there. And then they want us to set a bunch of properties. The properties are listed in a table at the top of page 328. So we're just going to set all of those properties one by one. And you should do the same by following your book or following me. So the CSS class is going to be error message. Once again. Display will be dynamic. The error message will say something that actually means something like enter your home or business phone number. In the text property, we want to change that, and I notice I'm in category view here, so I'm going to switch so I can find it faster. And we're just going to put an asterisk in again. And then for the client validation function, we're going to put in validate phone numbers. Now, this is kind of an interesting little property, folks, because really what we're doing here is by just setting a property, we're actually triggering a function call. So I think that's a pretty powerful thing. And we're doing it as a property, and I'm noticing that I misspelled it. And because it's a function, or if you want to call it a method, because it's a call to one of those, you've got to make sure that the case is accurate. Because if it's off, it's not going to work. All right, once you guys have that step done, we move on to step number 5. And now we're going to basically add some code that's going to respond to an event handler for this particular custom validator. So what we're going to do is, to generate the code, is we're actually going to double-click the custom validator. Now, you might find it a little tricky to do that, because if you guys are watching how my cursor is changing here as an I-beam, and then momentarily it becomes a relocation tool. And you can see the difficulty you might have, because that asterisk is so small and triggering it to go into code mode. Remember, if you want to go to the code mode, you can always just expand the file, and there's that file that's attached, or you can press F7, takes you to the code view. There's also a few menu ways to do it as well. But the point of double-clicking the control itself is to have it build the code stub relative to whatever the default action is for that item. And if you look at what code it did generate, you'll notice that it says basically that it's looking for a server validate event argument. So basically it's kind of an automatic tool. It assumes that if it's a custom validator, that it's going to look for some sort of validation script is really the point. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to steal some code from the book. And it's just a simple if else statement. And then we're going to paste that into this area. And because I have enough room on my screen, I'm going to truncate that down into one line, which I think is a little bit easier to read. But if you try to read this, and I think it's helpful to do that, it says if, and notice that there's an exclamation in front of each one of the statements on either side of the or. We're looking for one or another situation to be true. It says, if not string is null or empty, phone, home, text, or if not string is null or empty, business. So what they're looking for is they want either a business phone number or a home phone number. This is really the logic here. So they're looking to set basically a true or false. It's like, we need to be able to reach you, so give us one or the other. That's what we're doing. All right, now we're going to go back to the user control, so back to the ASCX page, but we're going to switch to source code view. And what they want us to do is actually drop JavaScript directly into the file. Can anybody give me the rationale as to why I'm putting my JavaScript inside the user control and not in an external file? Because that makes the user control more portable, right? I don't have to worry about remembering to grab a JavaScript file from somewhere else. That's the why, if you're wondering. I'm going to copy paste in 2 steps here because it spans pages. And they want us to add this code right before the table with the controls. So that would be up here at the top. And then I make a little space to paste in the rest. And then I'm going to go ahead and format this selection here just to make it look a little nicer. Now, if you read through this code real quick, so we have the function that we're calling from the control that we just added, validate phone numbers, and that's why it has to be exact upper and lower case. And then it's going to store a couple things inside of variables. And if you notice what it's storing, is it's storing the information that it's pulling from the form into the variable directly. Now, what's interesting about this is we're using JavaScript here to do that work. And JavaScript in the past was the heavy lifter for validation. Before HTML5 did a lot of the stuff, that was the tool we used. But what's interesting is look on lines 26 and 27 and see like the tags that are highlighted in yellow. And notice that they are ASP delimiters on there, so they're ASP tags. And then also notice that each one of them has an equal sign in there too, right after the opening tag. And the point of that is to show you that you are pulling information. There's an interchange of information happening within the code. So here we're basically switching to the ASP tag to just be able to leverage this content and pull the stuff in. Now also notice the second part of this function is this. So what is this doing? Right. Okay, so are you guys catching this? You could answer, it's doing the exact same thing that the C# was doing. Are you guys seeing that? It's checking to see if one, and actually it's got the pipes in the middle of the statement for the test for the if statement. So either one or the other. So if one of them has something in it, then it triggers the same way. But it's kind of interesting because it's basically the same logic, but because we're using a different language, we're saying not equal. You notice the different approach, but it really is the same logic. Now, in the old days of JavaScript, when we used to write all our validation this way, we did a lot of this stuff, and a lot of it was mostly checking to see if it was empty. You know, hey, we need your phone number. You forgot, and then you write them a message. So that's kind of what we're doing here. Yes, Brian.
That's JavaScript, but
shouldn't it be a what?
Does it not matter? It depends.
You know what, Brian? It actually does not matter. That's pretty interesting. Now keep in mind here, you're thinking, should it be a double equal sign? If we were checking to see if phone home value equals empty quotes, like that's what our desired result was, we would need two equal sign. Because right? Because otherwise it's an assignment statement. But when we're negating it, we don't need the two equal sign. One is adequate. Pretty interesting, right? Great question, though. Okay, let's move on. All right, so it says step number 7, save all your changes. So let's go ahead and do that. Each of the open files. And then let's try to bring this page up in the browser. So I'm just going to go ahead and right-click the file directly and open it. And of course, it fails. Did anybody else get that? Boy, this is like shades of last week, right? Remember we had this problem last week? And what's it sticking on? Well, we should probably actually read the error message here. It says, an error occurred during the compilation of a resource required to service this request. Please review the error codes. Okay, so it says, the type ASP controls contact form ASCX exists in both some temporary location and some other temporary location. And it, once again, is kind of pointing out, and I'm wondering if it is about this prefix, but it tells us exactly the file, which is the contact page, and line 9. Now, when we jump back to Visual Studio, I'm going to do a little task here that I did not do before. And I'm actually going to do a build on this, because it should trigger the errors if errors actually do exist. Now, was there a file that I forgot to save along the way? I don't think so, right? It doesn't seem to like this line. All right, I did this build, and sometimes that takes care of a lot of problems. And I think that what I'm going to do is I'm actually, instead of like right-clicking that particular page, I'm just going to go ahead and launch it like this, right? So now it is launching. I'm going to just send the form as it is. Hey, you know what? Actually, there wasn't an error. I think that when I did the build, it fixed things. Now, see, at least one of you is having an issue also, and we'll come and take a look and see what's causing it.
Is that your build solution?
Yeah, right up at the top. Yeah, the question was, oh, you're still working on the email part. All right, you're ahead of us. All right, but I chose this option here because basically what this tool does is it runs the compiler without launching the project, right? So now what that takes care of, just so you guys understand, is like when you compile code, sometimes you have like memory registers or little snippets of things that kind of stay active in memory. And a lot of IDEs not only have a build option, but they also have a clean. And that's a trick that you may have learned in your Java class too, that often if you're having an issue, especially when you're doing database interactions and server-side things, that sometimes doing a clean and build, or a clean and then a build separately, helps to resolve some things. All right, so it seems like it's working okay. And really what all they want us to do is exactly what I just did, which was to hit that play button, get it up on the screen, and just hit the send button. And now you see all those error messages we typed in before, they're just appearing on a list at the bottom. So that's what we accomplished here, folks. Now, if you want to play with it a little bit, type some stuff in. I'm going to leave the phone numbers empty, right? So you catch what that's doing there? It's intelligently seeing if one or the other is empty. It is. It is that dynamic part of it. So let's just put in, something here just to use. And then you see that now it clears. Will it work if I move this one over here? So can I refresh this? And now it clears. Now we're not jumping onto anything else right now. We're not sending it off to a server yet, but we're going one step at a time here. So we got this part to work. And now we're going to move on to step number 8. So it says go back to Visual Studio, which I'm doing, and click the validation summary control. So I got to get into the right view here. And that would be the one that's down here at the bottom, right? And it says in the properties grid, change the show message box, and this is kind of a neat little feature, I think, to true. So what do you guys suppose that does? Shows a message. Well, thank you very much, Brian. In this case, yes, we do. So let's go ahead and do that, and let's go ahead and launch it again, which I'm guessing is what they're going to have us do. So all that does is this. Instead of putting it at the bottom of the screen, it gives you a pop-up. You tell me what you think is more effective. Is the pop-up better or is on-screen better?
I think maybe the pop-up might be more effective because user interface and stuff, you can also
It's probably bad if you got both. Well, by triggering this, it should eliminate the other one. Now, yeah, I was just going to say the exact same thing, John. But you see, the pop-up is an intermediary step. After I clicked OK on the pop-up, then I got my asterisks and the messages at the bottom. Which is better? You know, honestly, I would say the jury is out on that. It depends on the application you're building. But in this case, the book wants us to try it, so that's why we're doing it. All right, the other thing that we didn't do, which we should have done, I guess I should have read all of step 8, right? I'm sure you guys are doing the same thing. It says that we should have also set the header text to say, please correct the following errors. All right, so just so we see what that does, let's go ahead and save the file again and run it. And, you know, let's trigger the error forcibly. And now you can see that it actually includes that text in the box. Now, the unfortunate thing about using pop-up boxes, this is one thing I'll say about them, is whatever browser you're using, whatever operating system you're using, the pop-up boxes can appear in different spots and look different. You cannot control that, unfortunately. So what a lot of modern programmers are doing is they're opting away from that approach and often designing their own pop-ups that do the same thing and also prevent the user from interacting. For me, that seems like a lot of extra work, but if it is visually more effective, I can see why you would do that. All right? So really, you know, in terms of... That's right, or if they have JavaScript turned off. Right? So that's where you get into a whole bunch of a host of other issues. Really, at this point in time, I think I'm hoping people have figured out that JavaScript is okay, because really it is. Like cookies are okay. But, you know, hackers do all sorts of bizarre stuff. And usually what they do, frankly, to get people is they trick them into doing something that seems like it's normal. You know, and then all of a sudden you got spamware and you got issues, basically. All right, I'm going to be moving on now. I'm not going to do a whole lot of prefacing on the next little exercise because the book does a pretty decent job about talking about how email sending works. But long story short, is an email address usually has or an email account has two different ways to interact with the user. For most of us, you know, we do email, and I don't know what the percentages are these days, but it's a really high percentage of people using basically web-based applications. You know, Gmail, Yahoo, Outlook, Hotmail, whatever, you know, those types of things. And that's only increased over time. The reason it has increased is because it's easy to use, right? It doesn't matter what device you're on. And if you have a browser and an internet connection, you can get to your email. In the old days, in order to do email, you had to, well, first you had to have an account, and then you needed to know the server address for that email account so you could receive the mail. And then you could receive the mail in a bunch of different formats. You could receive it in POP3 or IMAP or Exchange or a few others, actually. But these days, really, it's kind of boiled down to the fact that it's either POP3 or IMAP. And really, the better choice these days is IMAP. And the difference between the two is when you're pulling in emails, POP3 basically does not do a full server interaction. It will download the message to your machine or your client, and then depending on how you have it configured, it might be deleting that message directly from the account as it's downloading it, which that's kind of alarming actually, right? Because that's actually the default. But if you choose an IMAP for email setup, the neat thing about that is it replicates the entire folder structure of your email account on whatever device you're using. So whatever computer you would go to, if you sent a message, you could see that it was sent regardless of what machine it was from. If you do a POP3, unfortunately that won't happen. The message will only be stored on the machine where the client software is located. So you can see why people have kind of moved away from that. Most powerful email programs like Microsoft Outlook or Mozilla Thunderbird, those are probably the more popular ones. They do have the new Outlook Mail in Windows now, and then Mac has its own mail program. Those are probably the most popular standalone clients. Most of those have automatic scripts now built in that recognize that you're using Yahoo, Gmail, etc., and set it up really easily for you. There are some exceptions, though. I've discovered that working with Gmail, for example, when you work in Microsoft Outlook, sometimes you have to add third-party tools to get that full interaction.
You have to have it look at it work. You actually have to go in and set permission for, like, within Google or Gmail.
Yes.
To say, hey, you can use this on a third-party application like Outlook.
Right. Yeah, and that, Jason, that's a great point. And if you guys, I'm not sure if you, in video you guys heard what Jason said, but basically he was mentioning that in some applications like Gmail, you actually have to go into the Gmail settings and trigger a switch that allows you to use Outlook properly with it. However, I will let you also know that there are third-party tools that actually circumvent that. And I know a few faculty members here at Gateway that don't want to give up their Outlook for doing Gateway email and use, I think, a tool called like Google App Sync is, I think, what it's called, and that one works pretty well. And it integrates directly in. I haven't been brave enough to just go full force into that, but okay. Now, the other part of an email account, so going back to that, that's pretty important, is this concept of how we send mail. Whether you're doing POP3 or IMAP as your protocols to pull the mail in, to send mail, the send mail is relative to whatever network you're on. And this is the thing that usually gets people and why this assignment, especially with this next exercise coming up, often doesn't work for people. The trick is that a send mail server is actually different from the incoming mail server. So your send mail might come from one server, or excuse me, your incoming mail comes from one server, and your mail is sent from another server, right? The problem with it is companies that provide network access don't like you using their send mail to send email for accounts from other systems, right? So I'm using Time Warner, and I'm sending my AT&T mail, and it doesn't like that to go through their network because it's like, well, hey, why don't you use their server? So in some cases, you'll have to make these special settings to trigger it to work right on a different network. And that can be a real hassle. This is why webmail is so darn popular, right? A lot of people don't know this, but you can actually take any computer and turn it into a send mail server. Any modern computer usually will have that capability built in, but you have to know how to get it going and running. And then you run into a different complication, which is your service provider once again might block that. So it's really kind of a weird area. Now, the question is, why do they make it so tricky? Because spam is a big problem. It used to not be locked down so much. It used to be wide open. And then once you create a portal or a way to send email, a lot of providers also have a limit to the number of messages you can send per day without paying money. And a lot of people aren't aware of this. So, like, for example, I know like with GoDaddy hosting, if you get a free email account that comes with, right, and the truth is you can add as many as you want, you have a limit of 250 emails a day that you can send, right? Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of enlightening. I don't know if they've changed that, but the last time I checked, that was the number. And the problem with that now, if you think about it, is if you're trying to spam a whole bunch of, do some email marketing, you might have a list of 10,000 people. So if you can only send 250 a day, that's a problem. So what you do is you buy additional email relays. or you start getting smart and you use a third-party service to do the work for you. The real popular ones would be ones like Constant Contact, right? Or my preference, which would be MailChimp, which is one that for free does a lot more than Constant Contact does. All of them, basically, there's a cost to entry. And there's many services that do it. But it's really kind of interesting stuff to know, because why is such a big deal about email? Because email is kind of like the electronic equivalent of direct mail marketing. Why do people do it? Because it actually works. If it didn't work, they wouldn't do it. Now, the thought is, the way that you're on somebody's email list is because you went somewhere, you signed up for something, and you clicked the box and said, yes, I want to receive your emails. And I have a few that I voluntarily receive. You know, for example, like I get my half-price books coupons in the email, right? And I do that voluntarily, right? So a lot of little considerations like that. All right, let's move on to the exercise. We are on page 336 at the bottom. So once again, bottom of page 336, we're going to work on actually trying to send these emails now. And this, I'm just going to preface this right now. I haven't tried it this semester yet on my own before I came to class. Usually I try to do that. I'm working off of the code that I used last year. The thing that you will discover is that you can make this work given the right settings. Let's proceed with the steps, and when we get to the part of putting in the settings for the email send servers, we can talk about what is right and wrong and how to figure that out. All right, so we're going to go back to Visual Studio now, and we're going to go to the demos folder. So you're going to collapse some things down to get there. And we're going to create a new file. And it's basically a web form called email.aspx. Yeah, and they do want it to be uppercase E. And I'm doing this all wrong, aren't I? Because I should be, I'm just reading the instructions now. Make sure it's based on your own base page template right before I click OK. So I'm going to cancel. There's my base page there. Right, because remember, the reason we're doing this is so that it fits the format of our project, and that's, you know, one of the reasons why we use this tool to begin with. So we want to make sure it inherits from the base page automatically. Make sure it's got the right master page. Don't add a tab stop to the beginning of it. And you also want us to change the title to email demo. Let's switch to the code behind View. So you can do that by just pressing F7 on your keyboard, or you can double-click the document in a blank spot and it'll take you there. And then what it wants us to do is add an additional using statement at the top. And the reason that we're doing this is basically to be able to use the tools that send the email. And if you're using C#, the statement is system.net.mail, which you can see right on the list there. Right? Otherwise, the application doesn't have the right tools available to do the work. Then in the page load section, they have a whole block of code. And so let's go ahead and grab that and drop it in. And most of this is pretty simplistic, really. You can see what it's doing is it's basically creating part of the email for you. I mean, it's pretty easy to figure out. Well, it's pre-filling the subject for you. It's pre-filling the body. It's actually populating the to and from addresses. And then it also is making a call there on the second last line and the last line to your SMTP client, which we're going to specify elsewhere and then be able to tag in. Now, this is kind of interesting in the fact that you can actually populate these to and from fields, right? So really what you should probably put here is something that you want the users to see. So you ever wonder, like, you get these systems where you get like the do not reply emails and how all that's generated. They just write it into script files like this. And then when you do try to reply, of course, it's going back to an address that doesn't exist because it's just a snippet of text. It's not anything real. So if you want to put in something that's real here, it actually helps when you're trying to receive the message, because one of the things that happens when you play with this exercise is you get to the point where you're actually sending it, and then it actually is going through, but then it gets to like your Gmail account or something, and Gmail's like, hey, this looks pretty bogus. It looks like one of these automated scripts that some novice programmer didn't forget to change the default stuff in there. So what I do recommend that you do is actually come in here and maybe type in, you know, your name, or you got to think about like the email message is coming from, it's coming from Planet Rocks. So let's do that. Planet Rocks, and the receiver name is Ty Planet Rocks rep, right? Something like that. If you want to put in real email addresses, go for it. What I'm going to do is, I'm just going to put in like a gateway email address. I am going to put in one that's bogus. See what happens. And here's where you might want to actually put one in that's real, because you're sending it to somebody, right? You want to maybe send it to like one that can actually receive it. Does that make sense? Okay. So if you made those changes, go ahead and save it. And this is another one of those steps that always catches people too. Because you got to remember, if you're sending from somewhere, it is better to actually send from somewhere tangible, or at least somewhat tangible. But where you're sending it to has to be real, otherwise, guess what? It's not going to work, right? The next step is one of the more important ones, and that is we're going to jump over to the web config file now and drop in some code. And I'm going to pull over the book back on the screen here just for a second and talk about this a little bit, because they do give you some settings. And prior to this exercise in the book, they kind of walk through what some of the settings do. And the fact of the matter, folks, is before you can really set this stuff, you got to do some research. Okay? So if I was, let's say, using Gmail, I would probably go to Google, of course, and type in Gmail SMTP settings. And then, if you're lucky, not that it's really that hard, but it's a quick little search, it tells you what settings you should be using. Because there's a lot of stipulations here. Some send mail servers require encryption. Some use default ports, some use custom ports. Some use ports that require encryption, and some use certain types of configurations in order for it to work. So you have to research whatever send mail server you're using. You have to research and know what those settings are, because that's another barrier to entry here in terms of getting it to work. So these are the Gmail ones, and I would suggest if you're trying to use your real Gmail account, that you try these. Now, here's the thing. Remember, your gateway accounts are also Gmail accounts. So you can use these for your gateway student accounts. And I have had students get them to successfully work. However, I've had a larger number that get them to fail. So that's why I'm pointing this out. So they have a little setting listing here. And you can see the syntax, but the stuff that we're really interested in is the stuff that's in the middle here. So they are indicating some of the stuff that's coming in. And I want you to notice that, hey, didn't we just already set the from address? So what's the difference then? The difference is this is stuff that you can dynamically put in. You can send out emails that are actually going from one account, but you put in the text that appears in the user's email looks like it's coming from a different account. It's a spammer's technique. In fact, some spammers get really, really clever with it and can hide a whole bunch of stuff, make it look like it's coming from Microsoft.com, and it's coming from like a malicious hacker in China.com, right? So things can be spoofed is basically the point. And then the part that's really important is the actual SMTP address and then all those other little settings. And like I said, right before this exercise in the book, they kind of detail how to make it look. Now what I've done is I do run my own web server, have for many years, and it is hosted. I don't run it on my own machines anymore. But I'm copying my settings from last year's work, and I'm going to drop that into my web config file so I don't have to retype it. You guys can feel free to use my account in my web server to complete this exercise. So this is the code here, and you can see I actually had set this up for one of my Ruby on Rails classes where we kind of do the same thing. And my thinking was I control the server, I control how people connect, I control the ports, all that stuff. And the last time I tested this, and frankly that was last year, it worked just fine. So yes, that is the actual password for the email account. If you want to try to hack it somehow, go for it. I just ask that you don't spam because my host will shut me down if we're sending out spam. But you can go ahead and use these settings. So I'm just going to leave that up on the screen for a moment. And you do need to get everything from this section through that section. So let that sit up on the screen for a second. I am pausing the video though. All right, so now that you have that typed in, make sure you do save the web config file to lock in those changes. All right, next thing we want to do is actually try this out and launch the page, and then we'll bring up the email page. And you know what I didn't do is, well, that's in the demos folder, right? So really what I needed to do was actually launch it directly to that file. So I do have to stop this, and I apologize. Because we didn't add it to the site or the menu structure, did we? All right, so that's it. And you got to remember what's happening on the back end, folks, is this page triggered a script that's doing this work, right? So we're not like doing anything on the screen that's making it happen. You guys catching what's going on here? All right. So then they're saying that if I go to my email account, and I'm going to go to my gateway account, and I'm going to pull it off screen just in case there's anything personal or private. And looking right now, and indeed the message did arrive in my inbox. And I'm going to tell you what, I'm actually surprised it arrived this quickly. In the years past, I've seen it take quite a while before it would arrive. You know, sometimes up to like 5 or 10 minutes, and I'm not sure if that was like email relays being an issue. But this is just proof that script works. Now, the question becomes then, what do I do with this? Well, this is great if I pick, run this page and it sends me an email. But really, the point is that eventually you tie it into the rest of your application and send the email. So that's the next exercise. You guys ready? All right. Let's go ahead and close that browser window. We're now down on page 341. And we're going to, now it says step 1, we're going to add a new file to the app data folder. Yeah, and here's the thing, I don't even have an app data folder, so we better create one, I suppose. Let's create a new folder called app data. And you know, I'm going to tell you what, I'm a little concerned. I mean, this should be fine. Did it work for you guys? Oh, you did? Well, I'm glad you got it to work. It's a good feeling when something works, isn't it? All right. Let's go ahead and add a text file now. So add new item. And then we're just going to add a plain old text file. Yes, you can do that. And they do want it named contact form text. And then go ahead and click add. Yeah, we're going to take this text now. If the question is, this is going to get stored there, Jason? Is that what you're asking?
The form data.
No. This is basically setting up a format with placeholders.
Oh, okay.
And I'm trying to format it just the way they have it. And they have like tab stops and everything in there. But really what's going on is they're setting it up so that when we send the message, that the stuff that we're pulling from the form is going to drop into these areas, and then everything else is the structure for it, right? Because if you take something from a form and you just send it, do you know how it sends? In the same format that you get a search URL in Google. You know, it's like ampersands and colons and equal signs and question marks and there's no spaces and it all gets squeezed in and it's unreadable. So the point of this really is to make it look nice and in like a format that makes sense. So I'm just going to leave this one like this. I think that's actually adequate. Now they want us to go back to the control, and they do want us to go to the code behind page, and they want us to first make sure that we add a couple of libraries. So let's make sure we add those. And one of them is using system.io. What the heck is I/O? Input, output, right? And the other one that we're going to be using is system.net.mail, the same one that we were using before. Let's type using first, though. Oh, I put that semicolon at the end there. Let's see, the next step, step number 4, that's the bottom of page 341. And they want us to go to the regular markup view now. So they want us to look at the source code for the web page, go to the top of where the table is declared, and right there they want us to add a couple of attributes. And those attributes are these. One is run at server, and the other one is to give it an ID. And we're giving it an ID because that allows us to act upon it with scripts. It also allows us to style things. Top of page 342, step number 5. So scroll down to the end of the file, right after the closing table tag, so way down there. And add a label called message. And they do give you the code. Now you can actually drag and drop the control in, but I'm saving the time and I'm just going to paste in the code from the book just to make it go quicker. right? And set your attributes as follows. All right, and then they want us to switch back over to design view. You guys with me? Going too fast? Nope, okay. All right. All right, so now they want us to find that validation summary tool again, and then go back and find a property called show summary, and they want us to switch it back to true. Did we change it to false? We were supposed to change it to false and missed that part. Okay, so we're good. And then the other one, show message box, that one that we played with before. And if you can't see it, you can do what I'm doing right now. And they want that changed back to false. So we're getting rid of that pop-up for now. Next thing we're also going to do is we are going to go to the code behind view here. And the way they want us to get in there is double click the send button, so this code's going to trigger when we click the button. And then there's a whole bunch of C# code at the bottom of 342. This is going to be copy paste in 2 steps here, because it does go across pages. And this is, frankly, pretty darn easy to figure out what this code's doing once you start reading it. All right, what is this code doing? Yeah, and that's exactly what it's doing. It's grabbing the stuff and it's replacing content. I mean, it even says replace. So it's looking for a certain string of text, and then it's replacing it with what's in the form. And then once again, they're making the point that that you should put some real email addresses here, because that's the #1 thing that's going to block you from actually sending a message, is having not real ones. So I'm putting my name in here, and just in case our admins are looking at their server logs, they can see that I'm doing this for class, not for spam. Kind of like that. And we're going to save all of our work here, so make sure all your files are saved. And let's go ahead and launch, and this time we're going to bring up the contact form. Right? Ah, wonderful. You guys getting that? Or yours is working perfectly, right? So here's what I'm going to do first, is I'm going to do a build, see if it throws any errors. Notice no errors here, right? So now I'm a little more optimistic that it might actually work. Okay, and we'll go to the contact page. So, yeah, it's pretty weird if it does that. So if you guys do get a little crash like that, don't start panicking and email me. Try that technique first. Try Control F5. Try doing a build real quick. All right, so let's go ahead and just type some stuff in here. And hit the button, and wow, it did something, right? And really what's happening, you have to conceptualize here, is if we were on a web server, if this was loaded up on a proper server, that server-side code would actually be interacting with whatever send mail systems need to happen, and the stuff that we just put in the form. If I did this right, hopefully will be in my inbox when I go look in about a moment here. which I'm about to do. So let's see if that works. Once again, I'm going to pull my email over for privacy's sake. But there is the message. It did come through. Notice how it's formatted. The information that I typed in actually did email. And you guys may have done similar exercises in maybe like your Java 2 class or your PHP classes. But this is, for as simple as it's pretty powerful. And you're actually doing some server-side interactions here and sending content over the internet on top of it. So pretty powerful little thing. Right, folks, that actually wraps the chapter. We are all the way through it, and hopefully you guys got it to work. The video is going to end here, but we're going to keep working on things here in class, answer any remaining questions that we have, and solve any problems. All right, so once you finish this chapter, make sure you move on to the next one.